Mayor Charbonneau at 6:30, and all members of council are in attendance.
Very good. Thank you, Deb. Then I'll call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the Council of Town of Saugeen Shores. Welcome all members, both in the chambers this evening and joining us remotely, and also welcome all members of the public who are watching us by the live stream this evening. We're glad that you're with us. The second item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. We have no open forum, so that moves us on to delegations. And we do have one delegation this evening from Adrian Mason and Dr. Rebecca Rooney. And they're here to talk to us about the Fairy Lake pre-feasibility study. And so we have 10 minutes for your delegation this evening. So the floor is yours. And I see Ms. Rooney there, or Dr. Rooney. So it's over to you, Dr. Rooney.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you don't start the clock before I got it up. Thank you very much, councillors and Mr. Mayor. It's a very great privilege to be able to share with you some of the results of our work looking at Fairy Lake. So as you know, Fairy Lake is located in the heart of town, and it's a site that's much beloved by the community, but it suffers some poor water quality, and it also has a problem with invasive species, including curly-leaf pondweed, as well as common carp. We came on board in partnership with the Nuclear Innovation Institute, NII, the town, and the historic Saugeen Métis to study the current condition of the lake and to develop some recommendations for restoring it to help manage these invasive species and to improve on water quality. And water clarity is really the main concern that's been expressed about the water quality. The clarity can be measured with what we call a Secchi disc. That's this sort of white, I hope you can see my arrow here, a white and black marked disc that we lower into the water. And the deeper that you can see it, the clearer the water. In cloudy water, obviously it disappears at a much shallower depth. And so that's what's here on this x-axis. And you can see based on weekly measurements from 2021 that the water depth to which we could see that Secchi disc was pretty high in the spring. So the clarity was pretty good. But then it rapidly dropped off, and throughout most of the summer, it was relatively low. And so here's some photos to kind of contextualize that. This is a photo taken when I was out there in May of last year, and you can see the tail of a rather large snapping turtle swimming away from us, as well as the tops of the curly-leaf pondweed itself growing here in the water column. But here is a photograph of Adrian Mason, who's also with us today as part of our delegation in August of last year. And you can see the water is much more murky, more like chocolate milk in terms of clarity. And so one of the things we're not sure about, although we know that there is a water clarity issue, is what the cause of that is, whether it is biological material that's preventing light from reaching deep into the lake, or if it is mineral material that's suspended. And so that's something we're trying to work out this year. We also measured recreational water quality in terms of E. coli, total coliform count, and water heterotrophic spread. These are different measures of bacterial load in the lake. And it didn't reach a level that would be of concern in terms of the Canadian recreational water quality guidelines, but it was pretty elevated, suggesting that there is some feces, maybe dog feces or goose feces, getting into the lake. And that could be from surface runoff or the goose and waterfowl feeding station that used to be present at the lake. And we've continued to measure that pretty much monthly this summer, and we've continued to see that it is fairly high. So it's something to be concerned about. Another element of water quality is the pH of the water. And the pH of Fairy Lake is actually quite high. In fact, it was for a brief period above the recreational water quality guidelines, above 9. The conductivity is not too high throughout most of the summer, but it's particularly high in the spring and the fall. And to us, that suggests that it could be maybe some groundwater inputs being an important source of water, or likely it could be runoff from the roads. And when ice, de-icing salts are used to try to control ice and protect public safety, that can then wash into the lake and change the conductivity of the lake, adding salts to the lake that are problematic for wildlife. Dissolved oxygen was something that had been expressed to us as a potential concern. I know the fountain was installed in the lake because of concerns around dissolved oxygen, but actually some good news here. The dissolved oxygen is quite high, at least during the daytime when we were able to measure it. So we measured it weekly across the course of last summer, and that's this blue line here. And the curly-leaf pondweed, one of the concerns around dissolved oxygen was that the curly-leaf pondweed is extremely productive, and it grows into this huge bloom that you've probably seen. It mostly takes over the lake, but then it naturally senesces or dies off. And as it rots in the lake, there was concern that this could use up oxygen, resulting in low oxygen availability for fish and other wildlife using the lake. We don't see that happening. So this is the period when most of that sort of decomposition is taking place. And the dissolved oxygen is about 100% saturation during the daytime. So that's not really a concern. Curly-leaf pondweed is very much dominating the lake. This is an invasive species, not from Canada. And it starts out in the spring, taking up almost 50% of the lake, and it just expands until mid-June, at which point it's part of the natural life history of the plant that it starts to what we call senesce or go dormant. It produces these overwintering buds called turions. They sink to the bottom of the lake and they just wait for the next spring when they're going to take off and grow like crazy. The rest of the summer leaves the lake kind of open, but we don't really see a ton of diversity coming in. So the other plants that we saw around mid-July, starting around mid-July, were different macroalgae or large colonies of algae, as well as some flat stem pondweed. So not a lot of vegetation diversity, definitely an issue there. We looked at the frogs, and so we monitored those in 2021 in May and June. And we found green frogs, spring peepers, leopard frogs, and American toads were all using Fairy Lake. There are some species that could be using Fairy Lake that we didn't detect. Bullfrogs, gray tree frogs, mink frogs, western chorus frogs, wood frogs, as well as pickerel frogs are all reported from the area, but we did not detect them using this chorus survey technique. We surveyed again in April, May, and June of 2022, and we actually only found 2 of those frog species. But the hope is that all 4 of them are still present. We also surveyed the fish using the lake. In the spring, incidentally, we observed common carp as they were breeding, doing breeding activities. But then in our summer and fall fish survey season, we detected mostly a cross between bluegills and pumpkin seeds, as well as some smallmouth bass, Johnny darters, and we saw 1 trout. And the trout was actually swimming in this particular location I want to draw your attention to, which we call the main drain. This is a photograph of it, and you can see the relatively clear water that's running in this drain. This is bringing water into Fairy Lake from the surrounding land, and the temperature of this water was cold relative to the lake water. So we think this is a source potentially of groundwater, clear, cold water, which is producing really good habitat that this trout was taking advantage of in August last year. And so we think this drain could be quite important to water quality in the lake and also just to fish diversity. We also looked at turtles, and we saw that snapping turtle that I showed a photo of earlier, quite a large fellow, as well as some red-eared sliders and painted turtles. So quite a lot of turtles in the lake. And we sampled aquatic macroinvertebrates. So these are, the aquatic bugs that live in the lake that are great bioindicators of the quality or condition of the lake. And we found in the deeper water sites, these ones in green, we didn't have a ton of abundance or diversity of invertebrates. The sediments were actually quite coarse and mineral in nature. Whereas when we were in the more what I call littoral areas, but sort of along the shoreline, we saw higher abundance and diversity of invertebrates, which is more like what we'd want to see. And so we think this is tied to the sediment quality. We looked at the sediment quality, and in the deep areas of the lake, we do see typical organic rich sediment with a high capacity to bind metals and to sort of protect water quality. But in the shallow areas here in orange, we actually saw quite mineral sediment. And this could be because it's coming in out of the storm drains, washing off of the road here, bringing in this more mineral coarse textured sediment, which isn't providing such good habitat for aquatic invertebrates. And so when we think about where this water and sediment would be coming from, this is the catchment or the drainage basin that we mapped for Fairy Lake up here. And you can see that the majority of land cover present in this polygon is agricultural and undifferentiated rural land cover. And so we've got a lot of farming happening here. And then there's also a bit of community infrastructure, obviously, in the town. And so we think it's a combination of these two land covers that could be bringing in the nutrients, mostly phosphorus we detected, as well as some of the coarse textured sediments and chloride or salts, raising conductivity and resulting in some deterioration of water quality. So in terms of our interpretation of all of this data that I know I went through really, really fast, but I only had 10 minutes, the water quality issue really seems to be a turbidity problem. We didn't detect elevated metals of any level of concern. So it seems to be a turbidity problem. And there's a question about whether that's caused by nutrients coming in off of the agricultural land, contributing to great algae growth, or if it's due to mineral material perhaps being exacerbated by the action of common carp. This invasive fish species, we didn't see a ton of them in the lake, but we did see them breeding. And they are benthivorous feeders. They feed by stirring up the sediment, and they can really make a bit of a mess of the water column. So it could be that, but it could also be just the actual source of water going into the lake. And we also found the bacteria was quite elevated in the lake. And so likely that also speaks to some of this runoff concern. It could be affecting the diversity of frogs that were present. We didn't see very diverse or abundant frog communities. As I said, the sediment seems safe. There's not a ton of metals or anything of conservation or ecotoxicological concern in the sediment. It's just very coarse textured. The carp are definitely present in terms of invasive species, but they weren't hugely abundant. And so their role in the water quality in the lake remains a little bit uncertain. The curly pondweed is definitely a problem because it is invasive and we don't want it to spread to any of the other regional waters, but it's providing a function in the lake and we don't think it's the cause of the water quality issues. So we don't recommend, a massive removal effort. We think that that might actually deteriorate water quality in the lake to a greater extent. It would be better to leave the curly leaf pondweed present until the water quality issues are addressed, because right now it's oxygenating the water and it's providing habitat for fish. It's not really clear what the fish and the frogs in the lake are eating. And so that's one thing we're working on this summer, trying to figure out what the food web looks like in the lake, using some novel techniques. And really we're interested in the water quality. So in terms of recommendations, our first one is around education and outreach to try to stop the spread of invasive curly leaf pondweed. It's not causing it's not the source of the problems in Fairy Lake, but it is certainly not something you want to introduce across the region. And so things like a gear cleaning station and signage and education and outreach campaigns can help encourage people to recreate responsibly and prevent curly leaf pondweed being spread, because it can spread not just by seeds, but also by the roots or those turions that I mentioned, those overwintering buds. Those can spread curly leaf pondweed so that it's invading other waters where it might be a big problem. We also recommend stop feeding the geese. We know there used to be a goose feeding station kind of over here, and that was a great fun activity for families. And I know that it was sort of beloved by the community. However, the fecal material that the geese were introducing into the lake were definitely contributing to the water quality concerns. And just any introduction of nutrients. I know that now that the geese feeding stations have been removed, some families are still enjoying interacting with waterfowl at the lake by feeding bread or other things they brought from home. And that's also going to be deteriorating the quality of the water in the lake. So perhaps a sign there to explain to families why it's important not to do that, but also, softening this built up hardened shoreline and replacing some of this turf grass, which geese and waterfowl love to loiter in, with some naturalized meadow flowering plants that would still be beautiful and attractive, but native species that would deter the geese from loitering. We think there's a huge opportunity because the community is currently developing the master drainage plan. And so this might provide opportunities for treating some of the stormwater before it gets into the lake and further understanding the source of the water that's going into the lake, like how much groundwater is playing a role, for example. Definitely a treatment wetland or settling basin or something that would remove coarse suspended material before it enters into the lake would definitely be helpful. And then finally, this main drain that I mentioned that's providing the cold, clear water that the trout was taking advantage of in August. That seems to be a really important source of clean water to the lake. And so we want to protect it and ensure that it is not modified during this modified drainage plan for the region. I hope I didn't extend beyond my 10 minutes. I know we don't have a ton of time for questions, so I put my email address here, and I'm really delighted to be able to share these results with us, to answer any questions that you have about our data or our plans for this summer. And we really hope that this information can be used by you when making policies, particularly when you're considering the master drainage plan and the future water quality of Fairy Lake.
That's great. Thank you very much, Dr. Rooney. I'm sure there will be some questions for you. So I'll ask if there's questions from members. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Rooney and Adrian. As somebody who grew up all around Fairy Lake, your mentioning of the increased waterfowl population is huge. There never were geese and ducks that really populated Fairy Lake, and the amount of fecal matter that they dump into that area really does have a problem on it. Also, when Saugeen Shores or older Southampton redid the roads, the amount of drainage that used to come into Fairy Lake has been significantly reduced. The main, there's about 3 main drains that used to drain into Fairy Lake. One that comes behind Jubilee Park, one that comes down behind the hospital, and then there's one down halfway between the front and back of Fairy Lake. But those have been changed because we put in sewer systems, so the amount of fresh water that normally comes in is also reduced. There also used to be a lot of perch and sunfish and smallmouth bass in the lake. Now, is there any way, what would you suggest? Do we need more fish, more amphibians, something in there to eat, or how do we bring back the lake? Because 30s and 40s, they used to cut the ice for the pond, the lake when it froze over, for ice for all the hotels and businesses. I wouldn't want to use that water now for any ice. But how do we go about clearing the water and getting it back to its normal state?
Yeah, thank you for that. And especially thank you for letting us know about some of the historical context for the lake, because we've been doing a little bit of research as well at the museum, and learning about the history of the lake has been really fascinating. I think the water quality issue in the lake is very much a source water issue. So controlling the amount of nutrients that go into the lake and treating the water that goes into the lake before it gets there is going to be the best bang for your buck as far as restoring water quality. Preventing addition of nutrients from loitering waterfowl is a big thing. I think that's pretty low-hanging fruit, and that will really improve the water quality. And then I hope that the work we're doing this summer to understand the food web using stable isotopes will give us a better sense of who's eating what. So one thing is that even though the curly-leaf pondweed is providing oxygen and habitat for fish, we don't know what it replaced. And so have we kind of lost out on net is still really a question. We would not recommend removing the curly-leaf pondweed until we have the water quality under control, because I think that could cascade into much more severe water quality issues. But so it's sort of a source water problem. I'm sure the invasive curly-leaf pondweed isn't helping. The invasive common carp also probably are not helping. But until we get the source water cleaned up, the other efforts are not going to really materialize much in the way of results.
We have 2 pumps, that fountains in there. Does that help aerate the water and cleanse it, or do we need another one, or is there a way we can dig a natural spring that can come in and help purify the water?
Well, so adding water, and it's interesting that you mentioned that some of the drains have been converted to sewers, and so that source of fresh water is lost. I'm sure that additional clean water, like the main drain is discharging currently, would benefit the lake. Removing fresh water would, adding additional fresh water would kind of just dilute what's present. But stopping the nutrient additions would be as effective. And so the oxygen is not a problem as far as we can tell during the summer. Over winter under ice might be a different question. But during the summer, the oxygen's nice and high. The fountains are doing a great job, but I think really the curly leaf pondweed is it's so productive and it's really photosynthesizing and it's just producing a lot of oxygen. So the concern I have much more is about just the transparency of the water, the clarity of the water, and the suspended material in the water. Getting that out is going to be really helpful to, increasing the amount of vegetation, and also, especially later in the summer, and also just the diversity of invertebrates and things that are in the lake.
Okay, further questions or comments? We'll go with Councillor Mayette and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thanks, Adrienne and Dr. Rebecca, for your presentation. I too have a little bit of history with Fairy Lake. Back in my days on the former Parks and Trails Advisory Committee, when Jane Jagalewski was the director of community services. Thank you. We looked at the lake as well, and we involved what was then the Ministry of Natural Resources, which is a bigger acronym now. I won't go into it, but only because I can't remember it. And their recommendation was to kind of clear the hard drive and drain the lake and start from fresh and clear out a lot of the invasive species and quite frankly the contaminants that are in there. That lake was a runoff pond for the tannery that existed there a century or two ago, and so there's a lot of nasties down at the bottom, and perhaps one of the ways that you can figure out what the fish are eating is to have them dissected and sampled, and you'll get the clues as to what they're taking in by that and whether they're good to eat. I'm not sure anybody would want to eat the fish out of there right now, but that certainly is a telltale. And but I would say more power to you. And one of the things is that by having more water clarity isn't necessarily the be all and end all, because more clarity, that means the light is going to penetrate deeper into the water, and you're going to have more vegetation growth, right? That's what they've found in many of the lakes in the Kawarthas and the Muskokas, is that the zebra mussel issues have made the water clearer, and that's led to much more widespread weed growth. So it's a delicate balance you have to strike there, but I applaud your work and I encourage you to carry on. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And thank you to Dr. Rooney and Adrian for your report and all the work you did on this. I've got a couple of questions. I was interested to hear about, just a comment about the pondweed, because I think that's so visible. Practically every year, as a ward councillor for Southampton, I get comments from people who are concerned about it and want something to be done to have it taken out. So it's nice to have that definitive information saying, until things improve on another way, just it's being useful in a certain way that we want to keep it, I guess. In one point in your report, you talked about, you said the sediment seems safe, but near stormwater inflows is very coarse textured. So I just wanted to know what the safety issue was there. That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor, for that question. So we had learned about the tannery, and we had some concerns about possible contaminants, particularly metals in the sediment. So we tested for metals. And the metal concentrations are not a concern. I think the only one that was even close to a level of concern toxicologically was there was some lead. That's pretty common because of leaded gasoline and other sources historically. But so the tannery doesn't seem to have been a big source of metals, which is in line with, it was also, it's a hemlock based tannery. And Adrian can speak to this more because she was the one doing the research in the museum. But so we think actually that might explain some of the kind of curiously high pH in the lake. But we don't think that the sediments are a contaminant concern, fortunately. However, they are not, they're surprisingly coarse textured, particularly around the littoral side on the road side. And that to me really speaks of runoff, the grit that we use and just the fast flow that comes from storm events when they're really washing off of roads. They can carry like grit that's not great habitat for invertebrates to live in, which means less food for frogs and fish. And so it does sort of build up as a problem. However, it's definitely not a safety concern from the sense of being like toxic. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you. Just a couple of other things. You mentioned in one of your recommendations to integrate a treatment wetland with a settling basin to help treat stormwater. And I know one of the contaminants that you talked about was road salt. In our environmental committee's report, we actually talked about that as one of our recommendations to try to look at alternatives to road salt, or at least recognize the problem. And we did a fair amount of research on that. So it was interesting to me that you saw that here. But what kind of, do you have an idea of the size, location of this kind of settling basin or wetland? Where would that go, or how would that work?
I think that might require a bit more thought than I could provide kind of on the fly right now. But settling basins in advance, like a forebay in a stormwater pond, can provide a really valuable site of still water to really, like that coarse material I'm talking about settles quite quickly out. And with it, any contaminants that are washed off of the roads, like tire particles and things like that, which really will protect the water quality in the lake, and I think lead to water quality improvements. The size necessary depends on the quantity of water. So we probably need a hydrologist or an engineer to do a few back of the envelope calculations to guess at that. But I think the overall drainage area for the lake is not huge. So I think there's probably space for that to be a feasible solution.
Well, thank you. And thanks again for your work. I think the residents of the whole municipality, but particularly Southampton, regard Fairy Lake as a treasure, and your work is going to help us keep that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Further questions or comments from members? I don't see any. I will just echo that, and also thank you to the both of you, and also to Bruce Power and the Nuclear Innovation Institute and the IPCC for their support in making this project possible. It's really one of those ventures that has really demonstrated the value, particularly of the Nuclear Innovation Institute, to the community, because they really helped us to make this this project happen. And it's as Councilor Grace rightly pointed out, this is a very important body of water, small body of water in our community. A previous councillor always called it Little Lake. He insisted it should be called Little Lake instead of Fairy Lake, because that's what it was years ago. So there's lots of lore around it, and lots of interest in it, and lots of community history there. And we want the lake not only to have a history but a future. And so hopefully it will have future. And I do hope our staff listening in here today, I think I can speak for council to say we'd be very interested to see some recommendations come forward in our future capital plans for work that we can do to implement some of these ideas that you have to help us control some of that water coming into the lake and do some of the other things to deter geese and other things that will improve the condition there. So I think I'm certain that we'll be taking some action going forward coming out of the work that you're doing. And so thank you for your work. It's been great.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear. And I hope we get to come back again after we've analyzed the data from 2022 and give you guys an update.
Oh, we very much look forward to that. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, both of you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we're on to item 7, reports of municipal officers, and 7.3, we have an infrastructure and development report. It's a staff report on the Madwayosh Street sidewalk installation, and the Director of Development Services, Mark Powley.
Thank you, Mayor and Committee. This report is further to a delegation at the July 11th Committee of the Whole on behalf of residents with concerns about planned construction of a sidewalk on the east side of Madwayosh Street. At that meeting, Council directed staff to return with a report providing an overview of implications that Council may wish to consider. To summarize some of the background, a 1.5 meter wide sidewalk was agreed to by 3 developers who had created a combined additional 17 lots along the east side of Madwayosh Street. And the town has tendered and awarded the work to Doug Welsh Construction in accordance with the development agreements and the approved 2022 capital budget. The report recommends that Council direct staff to install the sidewalk on the east side of Madwayosh Street as planned and as outlined in option 1 in the section on Council considerations. If I can perhaps have the clerk pull up the map that's in the report, if that's possible.
We'll give it a try.
Okay.
With us for a minute, Mark. We're going to try and get that up for you. So perhaps if you continue with the report, we'll get the map.
Sure. The 3 main options that were explored and the implications provided for Council in this report. The first is to proceed with the sidewalk project on the east side of Madwayosh as planned, as I mentioned. This can be consistent with the Transportation Master Plan and the agreements with the developers. Consistent with the contract with Welsh Construction. The budget's already approved, and so financially this would be consistent with the approved budget and no further costs would be expected. The second approach that we provide implications for were canceling the project. That would free funds to be allocated elsewhere in principle, but would not be consistent with the Transportation Master Plan and would involve negotiations with the contractor and possibly a penalty associated with that. And then the third approach we have provided implications about is reallocating the funds to install a sidewalk on South Rankin Street that could achieve similar objectives in line with the Transportation Master Plan, raises the need to revise or interpret agreements, and the contract with Welsh Construction would involve some negotiation as well. The project would be physically different, so there could be different quantities associated with that kind of work, which could go over budget. There isn't a design for that work as of right now, so we'd be looking at staff time to complete surveys and drawings for that project, and there could be changes in unit prices associated with if the width of the sidewalk has to change. So there is approved budget amount to do a project in principle. There would possibly be additional funds needed to deal with the final design and quantities for such a project. With thanks to the clerk for providing the map, just wanted to provide a bit of context for committee and the public. The if we start at Highway 21 or Albert Street at the bridge, and then moving west, there's an existing sidewalk there. It stops just short of the intersection with Madwayash Street. If we go north from there, that red segment is the proposed sidewalk that's at issue here. Continuing with yellow, there's another proposed there's an extension of that proposed sidewalk, which the current developer of that part of the street is planning to install. Then if we go to the end of Gosford Street, there is you can faintly see on the air photo, there's a trail connection to Shore Road. And there's also a trail connection at the end of Metcalf Street to Shore Road. So we looked at those three options, and as mentioned in the summary, although there are residents in the Madwayash area who do not wish to have a sidewalk installed on Madwayash Street, we're recommending option one in order to not override that broader community objective and policy that sidewalks are important for pedestrian connections in the community. Installing the sidewalk here will provide current and future residents that want to connect through the area with a pedestrian network. And the sidewalk project has been awarded, and there would be complications if that award was not executed. And all told, taking all that together, looking at the town's policy framework, the overall community objectives, our recommendation is that council direct staff to install the sidewalk on the east side of Madwayash as planned. That was the extent of my remarks, Mayor. Sure. And I'm also joined by Jay Posner, if there are questions that he may also be able to assist with.
Okay, well,
so the history of the subdivision. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you there, Mark, but there is a recommendation that council direct staff to advance the contract to install the sidewalk on the east side of Madwayash Street as outlined as option one. Questions, comments from members? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mark, and other staff involved in preparing that report. I have two questions first, please. The first is one of the options suggests that it's possible that staff could negotiate with Welsh Construction to come up with a diversion of those funds to an alternative project. So my first question is, if Welsh Construction theoretically agreed to such an alternative project without a penalty for breach of contract, would that be a violation of our purchasing policy to award a contract for that without putting it through the bidding process?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Charbonneau, our read of the purchasing policy is that what you outlined would not violate the purchasing policy.
Okay, thanks. And my second question is that according to the 2022 budget materials about this particular project, the amount contributed by the developers for the sidewalk was $5,090. So if this sidewalk ends up not being built, what happens to those funds? Could they be diverted to some other purpose, and what would the restrictions be?
Thank you, and through you again, Mayor Charbonneau. Those funds could be put in reserve for a project. The criteria around that would need to recognize that those funds are intended for a project of a similar nature for that part of the community, and would need to be clearly allocated for a project that is clearly similar to what was outlined in the agreements.
Okay, thank you. I do have some comments, Mr. Mayor. The sidewalk prioritization policy. Well, first of all, before I mention these comments, I just want to thank staff for being willing, and Welsh Construction for being willing to step back from the plan to go ahead with the construction and for being flexible and for putting extra work into the report on this. The sidewalk prioritization policy, which was approved by council in February 2022, is cited in this report as part of the justification for the construction of the sidewalk. Personally, I don't believe, and I think I've been consistent in my position, that not all streets in our town need sidewalks. So I went back to reread the agenda for January 24th, where this policy was presented to council. And I couldn't find the summary statement in the that was represented in this report in the policy. That statement is, quote, "The town should aim to provide sidewalks or multi-use trails on at least one side of all streets. For instance, not only on those with high traffic volumes," end quote. So I asked Mr. Powley, our Director of Infrastructure, about this today, and I appreciate his answer to me, which clarified that a recommendation of the Transportation Master Plan is to require sidewalks to be constructed on one side of all local roads. Those are roads which are classified as being local, and on both sides of all collector and arterial roads. The town classifies Madwayosh as a local road, not a cottage street, where it would be appropriate to apply policies and designs to facilitate the coexistence of pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists. If I could, please, I'd like to make sure that it's noted in the minutes that the sidewalk prioritization policy does not include the statement about the sidewalks being, or multi-use trails being on at least one side of all streets. The residents of the Madwayosh neighborhood told us that they consider their street to have a cottage area feel, even if the official classification is a local road. And I think that in terms of the reality of that neighborhood, there are some reasons why Madwayosh has more of a cottage feel. It's a dead-end street. It's a quiet area. And I personally don't think it needs a sidewalk in terms of a local road classification. The sidewalk prioritization section of the Transportation Master Plan, which was also included in this current agenda, includes a matrix to be used when deciding where to build sidewalks. Public support is one of the criteria used, although as this report points out, that factor carries less weight than public safety and accessibility considerations. Some members of council met with residents recently about this issue, and it appears that there's a substantial amount of opposition to the sidewalk being constructed. When the residents met with us, they also presented a petition, although I don't remember how many signatures were on there. Staff told us also in the report that there were apparent multiple opportunities for residents to be aware of and register objections to the sidewalk agreements at the time of various planning applications, and that staff did not receive any objections during that time period. I don't know that I believe that it's reasonable to expect residents to pour through planning applications to identify planned sidewalks. And I don't consider that to be true public consultation, although I guess technically it is. Staff did, however, alert residents to this upcoming project in the spring. And that's what led to the current objections. The developers, we've been told, had an obligation to inform their buyers about the upcoming construction of a sidewalk, but we don't have definitive information that occurred. So, Mr. Mayor, the staff report mentions the possibility of negotiating with the contracted construction company, Welsh Construction, to determine if they would consider transferring this contract to an alternative project. I've been concerned about the potential loss of money through a possible penalty regarding the loss of the construction contract. But tonight, our director has told us that an alternative project could be assigned to Welsh without going through the bidding process. Also, given the fact that the developer's contributions can be used elsewhere in the proximity of this development and included in our 10-year business plan, I would like to make a motion to defer this project to allow staff to negotiate with Welsh Construction to possibly divert the funds from this contract into an alternative useful project. Thank you.
Okay, so the councilors made a motion to defer the recommendation. Is there a seconder for that motion? It's a second by Councillor Davinsky. Is there further discussion? Now we'll be discussing the motion to defer. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Unlike Councillor Grace, I do believe that this is an important piece of roadscape that should be going into this development area. Yes, it is a quiet area, but it is also an area where people, not just of Mattawash, but the whole town will be using. Sidewalks provide protection and safety, and that's our number one concern. We've had residents voice their concerns about not having sidewalks, but safety must be the number one concern. The amount of traffic, whether it's small or large, anybody that's walking on the road is always at risk. I see this as a main new trail for people that are walking from main part of Southampton out along the North Shore. You can now take it from Mattawash all the way down to the North Shore, 3/4 of the way before you get to the first curve, once we finish that last little piece. I will not be voting for this motion. I believe that number one is the best choice for us to go forward. The developer has brought this forward to the residents, whether they remember it or not. It is part of our master plan, and I will not be supporting the motion to defer.
I think maybe just a question to staff, either to the director or potentially to Jim. I wonder, in this case, is a motion to defer essentially or by default a cancellation of the project? Because there's like right now we're on a timeline where we've delayed construction so that council has the opportunity to make this decision. I just wonder how long can we delay before we've in essence canceled the project? Do we have some sense of that, Mark?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mayor Charbonneau. There's additional design work that would be involved in setting up a new project. Presumably, it's going to be in a different location and have different base conditions at that site. It could potentially be not the same length and width, and there's staff time required or other time required for other experts to help us design that revised project. So I think it would be certainly at a minimum, I would say it would be at risk to complete it this year. It would potentially defer it into 2023. That's a bit of a speculative answer. We've been able to have time to have this conversation and the analysis that went into this work because the contractor has had other work in the town that they've advanced in front of this work. We could potentially look at other projects that they've also been assigned as part of this bid and continue to move those in front. But I do think there's a risk that at some point we would run out of time in 2022 to execute.
But beyond that, does the municipality put itself in some type of jeopardy with the contractor if we delay again and then and potentially push it out beyond a point where they can complete the work? Does a deferral at this point put us at risk of a penalty with the contractor?
To give you a definitive answer on that, Mayor, I think I would have to review the agreement, but I would imagine there would be some level of risk of that.
Okay, I think I saw the Vice Deputy Mayor, and then I saw Councillor Mayette.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I hope that, I think there's a report on the agenda later on this evening where Welsh Construction is being awarded a $1.1 million contract for the landfill site, I hope there's a willingness at least to, discuss openly with the town of Saugeen Shores what the options may be to see these funds reallocated to another project. So let's hope there'd be a willingness to at least discuss it. On page 2 of the report, Mark, I see that there's an odd road, there's a bike, it looks like there's a trail, future trail from the town off of the Shore Road, which I think is a good thing. And that's going to bring that traffic off of Shore Road up and through Magnawash. And I guess one of the suggestions if this is motion to defer tonight coming back, that please give consideration to an on-road bike lane 4 or 5 feet wide. It doesn't always have to be a sidewalk. I think there's ways to move cyclists, up through that area with perhaps a bike lane. I'm going to support Councillor Grace's motion. I'm not totally convinced that every subdivision we build, this has no exit. This is a no exit. It's a subdivision that's in and out. There's not a through road there, and 47 houses. And I'm not totally convinced that every subdivision we put in has to have a sidewalk. I just think it needs another look. And I will be supporting the motion to defer. I did meet with the residents out there, and I think they do have some compelling arguments. And so again, I hope Mr. Welsh has an open mind, and I think we should take another look. So I'll be supporting the deferral.
Okay, further comments? Oh, sorry, I had Councillor Mayette, and then I'll get Councillor Vinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. My first inclination when I considered this recommendation was also to defer, or rather to look at the possibility of option number 3, to reallocate the funds to another willing street or one that has a higher priority. But the one part that Councillor Grace brought up that I wasn't necessarily aware of was the fact that the developer had contributed funds. The developer on this street put funds into it. And so when it comes to liability, I wouldn't be so much worried about the cancellation from Walsh Construction, because we do a lot of business with Walsh, and I'm sure he's a flexible business person. But the developer, if he put money directly towards a project on the street that he's developing, and then found out that we were using his funds to put a sidewalk in on another street, then that he might have more of a compelling case. I would consider, I think you said $5,000 was what he allocated towards it.
$5,090.
$5,090.
May I respond? Okay.
I would recommend that in conjunction with the deferral, that if we're not going to put the sidewalk in, that the developer should be considered for a refund on that money. That would be my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, does the staff have any comment about the developer contributions and any risk that might be related to that?
I think Mayor Charbonneau, I'll invite Jay Posner, our supervisor of development, to see if he has any insights on that matter.
Yes, thank you. In terms of the developer contribution, the specific, they were collected, there's several contributions collected over several years. The one that's associated with the 7-lot subdivision that was constructed at the Gosford Range, sort of just south of Gosford, was collected on the basis of providing pedestrian connectivity and proximity to the subdivision lands. So a little open-ended. I mean, it's something council, I think, wishes, and the corporation really should strive for flexibility. So it was built into the agreement. The contributions from the developer of the lot south of Metcalf it said just generally sidewalk. Didn't say where, didn't say when. There was sort of not commitments on that. So I think there's some flexibility on where. Though it's certainly, this question is certainly related to risk. It's certainly there's a risk beyond the dollar amount. It's a risk associated with the reputation of the town and leading to potentially higher prices. And I don't want to offend people, council if they've already thought of this, but I think it needs to be said.
Okay, sorry, I had Councillor Davinsky and then I'll get Councillor Jakes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as seconder of the deferral, I might add that in the meeting we had with the residents of Mad Wayosh, there was a developer present and very much knowing that they didn't want this to happen, even though they may have put money in for a sidewalk. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I'm not sure which way to go on that, but that did happen. And also, there was a question asked of Mark, and his answer was, "We'll review the agreement." Well, that in itself, to me, says we've got to hold off on this until we get all our ducks in a row here, and thus the deferral on a priority list. If we took all the sidewalks or all the areas that don't have sidewalks and put them on a priority list, Mad Wayosh would be down near the bottom. There are many streets in Port Elgin and Southampton that are through streets, have heavy traffic, and there are no sidewalks. And since this has come up, I've noticed that more than I have in the past. So personally, I think Mad Wayosh can wait, but that's why the deferral, and that's why I seconded it. But and the developers are very much aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jakes.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, a question regarding accessibility. The road now, because I haven't viewed it, just due to my ignorance of not getting over there, would somebody be able to tell me, either staff or the councillors that were at the meeting, is it accessible? Is it easy to be on if you need to use a scooter, or if you have sight issues or oncoming traffic, width of the road, that type of thing? Would not having a sidewalk, would it make it a hindrance for those that might have to worry about accessibility?
I don't know if staff has any comments. I mean, it's probably not as safe as if it had a sidewalk. But are there, I don't know, Mark, do you have any comments to that? Or Council will get Councillor Grace to Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I would agree with that, and I can describe the road as it's 7 meters paved wide now, and someone using a scooter or something like that would be would not have a dedicated space to use in that road right of way today. I can't really speak to the specific criteria around accessibility in terms of whether that aspect of it. There's some technical aspects of that, but I think as a general answer to your question, the sidewalk would be safer than not. If I may, Mayor, I just want to clarify one of my remarks about reviewing the agreement. Executing the project as planned now does not require any review. Everything is ready to go. The remark about reviewing the agreement was in relation to questions around what would be the implications of a delay and the risk associated with that. Just to clarify that aspect. Thank you.
Sure. I guess, Councillor Grace, did you still want to make a comment or no?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say that I know from the report that Adam said that the width of the street was 7 meters.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And Councillor Davinsky.
Thank you. And in relation to the comment made by Councillor Jakes, you're absolutely right. You would have to be on the road, but those same people have to be on the road of these Port Elgin and other Southampton streets that are throughway streets, have lots of traffic on them, and do not have sidewalks on either side. Priority. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think, so we've had a good discussion. I might make a couple of comments. We're talking about the motion to defer, and I think certainly we could consider that, and there's a little bit of risk associated with that, but maybe an acceptable level of risk for council. But I think it's important just in the broader context to just remember that, whatever you think about where sidewalk may be required across the municipality, this has come about as a result of many years of work. Why is this sidewalk been proposed, right? Did we get the developer contributions? The developers didn't come to us and say, we'd like to contribute to a sidewalk. We insisted, right? We, the town, said there should be a sidewalk on that street. We've been saying it for years, right? We decided, and then we planned for it and took deliberate steps through several negotiations to ensure there would be a sidewalk. And then we had a budget discussion in 2022 where we made a deliberate decision publicly. We talk about the public process. So several development agreements publicly made in this room said, yes, there should be a sidewalk. Then a public budget process with Madwayosh prominently listed on the list where we said, yes, we're going to build this sidewalk. Yes, we're going to use this money. And we weren't having our arms twisted into that. We said we insisted on it. The reason why those other streets haven't gotten to that place yet is because we're still working our way through that process, through developer agreements and through budget processes to get there. We're going to get there, but every street has to have its turn. And right now is Madwayosh's turn. And this idea that it's a dead end street, it's not. It's a dead end street from the perspective of cars. Yes, they can't get through, but in terms of pedestrian connectivity, it connects everywhere. If you look at that map, it connects on a trail right down. If there's 3 trails going off, it gets you to the lake. We're not talking about cars. We're talking about pedestrians. That's what the sidewalk does. And there is pedestrian connectivity. You come out to North Rankin, you hit the trail, you go down to Scubby's Point, you go around, you can walk all around the place. And there's going to be hundreds of people live there. And some of the people who live there now don't want it, but they're not going to be the last people to live there. People live there forever. And I don't know, this is for me, a sidewalk on one street or another. I mean, and I don't get too vexed about streets. What I look at though, in this case, is what we have done, our reputation, our processes, right? How we approach these things. And then at the 11th hour, at the very end, to throw it all out the window or to risk throwing it out the window. I just can't get behind that. Like, I think we have these processes we got to carry through. If we don't want a sidewalk, at minimum, we should, at the beginning of the process, say we don't want it instead of insisting on having it. And then at the very end, saying we don't want it. I mean, that makes us look crazy. So if we're going to do this, and we're probably going to do this because I can sense the sentiment, but let's not make a habit of it, please. Please, let's not make a habit of it because this is, a mature institution that makes decisions in a logical way. And I don't want us to start making decisions in a disorganized way that makes us look disorganized and seem disorganized. And this does. So, yeah, Councilor Maya.
Thanks to you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your thoughts. A question, and through you, presumably there's been some work already done on this project. The locates have been done, the surveying's been done, the letting of contracts has been done. A question to the director, what would you say would be the percentage of the money allocated to this project that has already been spent before we put shovels in the ground? And I know in some cases that's a considerable percentage.
Through you, Mayor, I don't have that answer this evening. I don't believe the contractor has, in terms of the contractor, I don't believe they've spent significant money to date. There's been significant staff effort to get this ready to this point.
Sorry, the deputy mayor. I saw your hand before. The deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And one last thought. I just want to remind our fellow council members that, yes, there are other streets that need sidewalks. It's an ongoing process, as you said, Mr. Mayor. But this project has been paid for by the developers already. And it's not just the 5,000 that'll have to go back. It's that money plus time plus interest. So that money is larger amount than the $5,000 originally. So again, as you said, Mr. Mayor, we've already budgeted this. The work is set, And I don't believe we should be asking the contractor to put off this and maybe get it in this year, maybe not. They've got their financial plans budgeted for the year, and to take this away right now could have a financial impact on them. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, one more from Councilor Grace. Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification that the director indicated at my question about the $5,090 from the developers. His answer was that those funds must be used in the next 10 years in the business plan for a development or some kind of development that's in the proximity of this development. They're not being refunded to the developers, or, you know, that was my understanding of his answer. So just to clarify my understanding, I think that's true, is what the Director Bunshu indicated to me.
Okay, well, thanks very much. Did you have a comment?
No, I just, well, I did. I think what was said so far today is that per the agreement, it needs to be in the vicinity, so it doesn't need to be directly on the street. So it certainly is council prerogative to determine where that appropriate location is. And I think if it's used somewhere in the window of the next few years, that would be in the spirit of what has been agreed to with the developers. As was stated though earlier, there is time that's been put into this, in particular from the staff time. And that will be time lost if it's being redirected somewhere else. And in particular, if then down the road, if it is then decided later on that there should be some sort of pathway or sidewalk through this neighborhood, then that work will have to be redone. And that will be an opportunity lost. So that should be taken into consideration as well, which I think is to the mayor's point that he was making earlier, is sticking to a plan is important.
Okay, well, we've had a good conversation on it. Thank you all for it. And so we do have the motion to defer. It's been moved and seconded, so I'll ask all in favor of the motion to defer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's defeated. So we'll consider the main question then. And so I'll just reread the recommendation that council direct staff to advance the contract to install the sidewalk on the east side of Madway Street as outlined as option 1. It doesn't have to be moved. It's a recommendation, so it's fine. So we'll consider that. I'll ask all in favor. Sorry, 1, 2, put your hands up so I can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and opposed. That is carried. Okay. So we will move on then to 7.7, communications and petitions for information. And there are 5 items there. Let me just scroll through them here. Anybody wish to speak to any one of those? The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd just like to comment on number 2, Mr. Kulaha's correspondence regarding dogs on the beach. I think this is something that we've talked about a lot, but it is an issue I think that we can revisit again with the number of people we have, everybody back out again. The limited space for dog parks at the beach is very small. And if we did change the times a little bit, I think that would please everybody. So something that we could bring back to staff for report at a later time to look at for next year.
Yeah, I have received several pieces of correspondence on dog beaches in the last short little while, and I did speak to by email to the Director of Community Services and Operations today, and she suggested it might be advisable to ask staff to include that as part of their 2023 business plan as an item to consider. So perhaps that's something we can put to staff through Jim here tonight to consider a dog beach as to bring back as part of the business plan. Council could consider it at that time as to whether it's something it would want to see in the business plan, but staff could bring it back as part of the draft. Sorry, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
I just wanted to support the Deputy Mayor, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Kulia, has got some good points, and I think it's, I've heard over my 8 years on council, many questions, concerns about dogs on beaches, of course, and some like them, some don't, but the dog owners certainly believe that there should be better areas designated for dogs and not just rocky beaches that aren't good for paws and those sorts of things. So I just think there's some merit to take a look at this. And I think I like your suggestion, Mr. Mayor. And it's good to hear that might be part of the 2023 business plan. And let's take a look. And maybe there's a small section of beach somewhere, you know, that we can take our dogs. I don't own a dog, but I think that it's important to provide space for dog owners with a sand beach somewhere. Other communities do it. And I think that we as a community should be able to do it. I'm not sure where, don't know where it is, but hopefully staff can research that and come back and put in part of the 2023 business plans. So I support what Don Matheson is saying, and I support Mr. Cooley with some of his suggestions. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't know if the director of community services with us tonight. Oh, she is too. Is that agreeable then, Kristen?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the clarification, and we'll put that through for our 2023 business plan for consideration.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Are there other comments about any of the items for information? Don't see any. All right. So we're on to item 8, reports of councilors' policy. You have my report there for your information. You have a question, the deputy mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the report. I'm very interested in the electric vehicle charging stations. We know that the number of electric vehicles has vastly increased over the last 2 years. You just have to sit at the stoplight at any town and within minutes you see 1, 2, 3, 10 electric vehicles going through. Saugeen Shores being the fastest growing municipality in Midwestern Ontario, of course, but with the number of people that we have in the summer months, we do not have enough charging stations. And I would really like to see, although I'm not sure where they are listed in here, and if you could tell us that, or if there's a report we can read. I haven't seen that yet, but I do believe the Saugeen Shores has to increase the number of our charging stations. And that's something I've spoken with Director Schrader about, and I look forward to seeing that in the business report and maybe as a budget item in the upcoming budget.
If you're looking at the report there is a link to the regional electric vehicle charging strategy there, and that strategy can give you a bit of information on what was recommended by the group of counties that did that work. And there is no specific locations, although there are communities where they recommend having these level 3 charging stations as part of a broader network. And Southampton is one of them, identified as a place where one is needed to complete the network, although I think we obviously want them in Port Elgin too and across the community. But I think the next step in this is for local municipalities to engage with it and suggest locations and to become part of a broader request for proposals to make it happen. I see Director Schreider has come on. Maybe she has some comments about it.
Thank you. And through you, just as an update, is that we are in conversations with the county and West Ontario on the program right now. Colin has been talking with them, so we will be able to provide council with a little bit more update with regards to that program.
Yeah, very good. I got Councillor Mayette first, and then I'll get Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I was just going to say the same thing. I thought, I'm aware that Bruce Power and West Ontario have collaborated, and I wonder if that's part of the same regional strategy that you're talking about.
I think there are several things advancing all at the same time, and that's another one. And so in this case, probably more the merrier, because we'll hopefully get a lot of charging stations built as a result of that. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to comment on the same topic, and Chad Richards of the Nuclear Innovation Institute wrote a really fine report called Plugging In, which deals with this, and I'm sure the county is probably referring to that, but the Environmental Stewardship Ad Hoc Committee also included expanding our charging network as one of our recommendations. So, and we included a lot of sources that might be useful for this partnership to look at. Thanks.
Yeah, and I got the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I know you don't like these kinds of compliments and you probably don't require them, but I'm going to say it anyways. I read your report. 86 appointments. 86. We're all busy as members of council here, all very busy. But you know, I look at your schedule events for April, May, June, and 86 appointments. and running Highway Farms, you have family commitments. And I know from Lamont Sports Park, how many times you showed up for presentations, for check presentations, never said no. And have opened the doors for many other things for us. And I just want to say that you do. I know you say, well, we all do, but you do us proud of the community, and I mean that. And you have a very, very busy schedule. I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's a big job. Is there any other questions or comments? I might add to on the electric vehicle charging strategy item. It's important to note it's an opportunity for us to take municipal parking lots and turn them into profit centers. These charging stations, and it was a topic of conversation when this came up at the county among county councilors about the opportunity where we've been installing these almost pro bono up till now, where we've been sort of giving the electricity away as sort of pilots. But those days I think are behind us. And now, because folks who own electric vehicles save money by owning them, and folks who build electric vehicles make a lot of money making them. And I think, municipal taxpayers shouldn't be left holding the bag. They should be able to have the opportunity to make a profit running these things. And so to have them, I think municipal parking lots in our downtown cores in particular are great places for these charging stations, and we could make profit there, and we could turn that back to improving those parking lots, improving our downtowns, or doing many other things in our communities. So it's a great opportunity that hopefully future councils will be able to leverage in years to come. So just a thought. Anyway, all right. Thank you for all your comments on that. And that moves us then on to reports of department heads. And we have one item there, an information report on the landfill entrance project and the Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Mayor Charbonneau and committee. Again, this, as noted, this report is for information and update on the Southampton landfill, which is at capacity for traffic volumes and the waste that's being received. And so the phase one of the entrance project was awarded to Welsh Construction and is due to be complete by mid-November. And then phase two is anticipated to be tendered in the winter, with the construction complete in late summer 2023.
Great. Are there questions for the director on that report? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mark, for this report. This is, I think that the way that the entrance runs now is as efficient as it can be with the physical limitations. Staff does a really good job. I have a question about the recycling area, because I know that at least I've been told that one of the reasons why we don't have that recycling area where residents can go and deposit their own recycling is because of the fact that there was so much contamination, people dumping in things that really weren't appropriately meant for, for those depots. Do you anticipate that this new system will allow for people to come and deposit? If they miss the recycling pickup, can they go and deposit recycling materials again themselves personally?
Through you, Mayor, I don't have that detail this evening. I see our Director of Community Services on the line. She may have had more exposure to the drawings and the plans than I have so far.
Yeah, and I apologize for not giving you that question ahead of time.
That's fine.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the question, Councillor Grace, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Colin did discuss that. We did have to remove them, as you said, due to contamination. People were abusing that privilege, so they have been removed. The design, the last layout that I saw, the conceptual design is that we wanted to make some accommodation for a recycled area that could be locked up or not open after hours as well. So once we have a look at that final design, we can get back to you with that information, but it is a consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, are there further questions about this report? I don't see any, so thank you very much for that. And looking forward to that, seeing that project advance. All right, so now we're on to statements by members. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two events I'd like to comment on. I'm sure other people will comment on the one. This past weekend was the Southampton Marine Heritage Weekend, and it was a blast. The number of people down at the cardboard boat races, I think, was the largest crowd I've ever seen. The fish fry was great. The Friday night kickoff, the pancake breakfast. Kudos to everybody involved. Secondly, on Friday last week, I had the opportunity to drive the big bus. First Students was giving an opportunity to show off their new buses and looking for potential new staff, because there is a staffing shortage for the bus drivers. But something that people are going to be faced with is we're used to seeing when the buses stop flashing red lights. The new buses have 2 light systems. They give an amber to let you know that they're coming up to the stop. And then once they do fully stop, the red will be coming out. So there are 2 lights now to let people know what's going to go on. But the new buses are fantastic. They're all GPS guided. And if anybody is interested in becoming a bus driver, contact First Student.
Great, thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Just 2 items here, Mr. Mayor, and I just wanted to congratulate the Bruce County Playhouse Summer Theater, Murder for Two. I attended recently, and it was just incredible acting and performance, and really thoroughly enjoyed. And I just wanted to thank Bruce County Playhouse Summer Theater organizers for bringing theater back to Saugeen Shores. And if the members of the public haven't had a chance to see theater this summer, please do so and support this local group. They want to put people in the seats, right? It's important that people show up and support what we have. We don't want to lose it. So purchase tickets and take part. It's a great thing. And I just want to say thank you to Barry and Susan Dunlop. $75,000, to Lamont Sports Park. Just an incredible lifetime sponsorship for the Dunlop Field. And that's a good news story. And I just wanted to say to members of the public, our campaign goal is 1.5 million, and we're some big announcements coming up this week and next week and the following, and we're going to get there. We will get there. We'll probably pass 5 million is our hope. And I just wanted to say that the last leg we see as being a $50,000 campaign, and to build some batting cages for minor sports in a service building, and working on a pavilion too. So there'll be cards mailed out the first week of August to 7,000 householders, and in your mailbox, and look for it. And this is your opportunity, members of the public, to donate that $25 and $50, $500, $1,000, whatever you wish. It's your opportunity to be part of Lamont Sports Park Illuminating Dreams fundraising campaign. And it's going to be just incredible, as we all know. I mean, so look for that card in the mail early in August. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Councilor Jakes.
Just want to note, August 6th, downtown Port Elgin, they're having music downtown. So put it on your calendar starting at 1 p.m. and it'll be in each of the drinking establishments and restaurants in downtown. So book your babysitters, grab your mom and dad. Seniors are invited as well, I'm told, so I can go. And you'll enjoy a lot of local live music as well, and bring some people down to our downtown. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilor Smith.
Thanks. And just a little further to that, to Councillor Jake's point, the Port Elgin Block Party, as she was speaking of, is proudly sponsored by the Port Elgin BIA. They've accumulated the funds to pay for all these bands, including a Bob Marley tribute band that will be playing at the Queen's that evening. And just another quick note, just a thank you to the Southampton Tennis Club. Among all of the activities going on in Southampton, they also hosted an Ontario Tennis Association tournament for junior players this weekend, to much success and lots of heat, but great work as always by the Southampton Tennis Club.
Thank you. Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 things tonight. The first is this past week was the 35th annual Summer Music Week with about 170 students, approximately 35 instructors, additional performers, many volunteers, many members of the public who billeted, musicians, wonderful concerts. The event brought many visitors into our community for the week and provided performers and audiences of all ages with cultural enrichment. On this past Friday morning, along with a number of other residents from Saugeen Shores, I visited the Habitat for Humanity build site at Saugeen First Nation. We heard from contractors, administrators, and volunteers, and we're actually able to tour a home that's under construction. It's a very impressive project. And particularly, I think, interesting for us, this project, like all Habitat for Humanity projects, benefits various people who need some extra help getting into a home. In this case, their focus is young working families who are unable to obtain a conventional mortgage and are currently in unsuitable housing. But I know that as a former member of the Attainable Housing Task Force, we included a recommendation, I think, to explore a partnership with Habitat as one of our affordable housing initiatives. And I know that our staff is working to see how this recommendation might be brought into fruition in Saugeen Shores. So it was a great experience and always really inspiring to see Habitat for Humanity in action. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dubinsky.
All this going on, most of mine have been taken up, so I'll pass.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carr.
Nothing for me tonight either, sir.
Okay, you don't have to call me sir. That's my dad. Councillor Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. First, I think Councillor Grace forgot to mention that the Emerald Street concert, annual Grace concert, was held last week, and it was a tremendous success. And a great time was had by all, and a wonderful performance by Mike Grace and his accompaniments on stage. I would be remiss if I didn't mention also the Chantry Chinook Derby, which started on Saturday, or actually Friday at midnight, but Saturday morning essentially. And the current leader is a fellow by the name of John Injic with a 17.96 pound Chinook salmon. And that was caught on the first day, but there's been many entered since. I understand even our interim clerk's husband is on the leaderboard as of today. So many people are getting out. I have not got my name on the leaderboard yet, but I'm going to give it a shot one of these days, I can assure you. And the last thing was, oh yes, the Marine Heritage. I was down at the Marine Heritage Festival, and unfortunately they didn't have the big canoe tug of war. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, you and I remain champions until the next time there's a competition with the big canoe from 2019, and we remain the standing champion.
We were so good that they just had to retire the whole event because they knew that no one else could ever defeat us. And it's a shame, but that's just the way it is.
And that's all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I will just one other thing that I will mention is Bruce Power Fireworks, which occurred since the last time we met. And I just want to say thanks to Bruce Power for putting those on here and in Kincardine. I was down on the beach and there was, I don't know, 1 million people on the beach. That's probably an overestimate, but there was a lot of people on the beach, and everybody came out to see him. And it was just great to have stuff like that happen. And so thanks to Bruce Power for doing that in our town. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. The Deputy Mayor, second by Councillor Dubinsky. All in favor? Committee stands adjourned, and council will convene at about 10 after 8.
Mr. Mayor, we are here ready to go with all councillors in attendance, and it is 8:09.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'll call to order this regular council meeting, and the second item on the agenda is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Ask any member if you have one of those you'd like to declare at this time. Seeing none, of course, you could do that anytime if you need to. We have no additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. We have no public meetings, so we do have some minutes to adopt. And I have a resolution that council adopt the minutes of the council meetings of July 11, 2022, and the planning committee minutes of July 18, 2022. Note and file the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of July 11, 2022 as presented. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Grace and seconded by someone, Dubinsky. Oops. Okay, any questions, comments to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's true. I'm not on. Give me a second here. People wondering where that voice is coming from. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we are on to reports of Committee of the Whole. And we have a couple of reports there, 3 reports actually. And the first one is a general government report regarding council chambers upgrades. And I have a resolution that council approved the modernization of the council chamber upgrades, including cameras and audio equipment up to $60,000 plus applicable taxes, and proceed to RFQ immediately using future capital projects reserve funding as an addition to the 2022 budget. Actual installation would occur in early 2023 in advance of the 2023 budget approval. Is there a mover and seconder for that? The Deputy Mayor and Councillor Mayette. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? And opposed? That's carried. All right, and then the second report is an infrastructure and development report regarding K&K Lawn Care request and land transfer from Summerside subdivision. And I have a resolution that council approve the following. 1, accept option 3 of the staff report regarding the K&K Lawn Care request for relief from water sewer billing, which suggests that a staff report be prepared to consider the implications of a revision to the water sewer rate bylaw to include a light industrial rate. And 2, authorize the transfer of part 3, reference plan 3R 9253, being the stormwater management pond and wooded lands of the Summerside subdivision to the town of Saugeen Shores as their mover and seconder. Moved by the Vice Deputy Mayor, second by the Deputy Mayor. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. And then the third report, which is Committee of the Whole report regarding Labor Day fireworks funding. And I have a resolution that council support the Rotary clubs with the support of a one-time donation up to $5,000 for the Port Elgin Main Beach Labor Day fireworks. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Carr, seconded by Jakes. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right, now we're on to bylaws, and there are 3 bylaws here for consideration. Does anyone want to have one of those considered individually? Seeing no requests for that, then I'll read the resolution that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 25th day of July, 2022. 166/2022 being a bylaw to delegate authority to the Chief Administrative Officer for certain acts during the restricted acts period. 267/2022 being a bylaw to authorize a pre-servicing agreement with SG Real Estate Opportunities, GP, for the Spence Street subdivision. And 368/2022 being a bylaw to appoint a municipal drainage superintendent pursuant to the Drainage Act, RSO 1990. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Carr, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. All right, and that then moves us on to a closed session, and I have a resolution that council move into close to public session to discuss matters in accordance with bylaw 63, 2015, section 3.8.2C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, E, litigation or potential litigation affecting the local municipality or local board, section 3.8.2F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege regarding the following. 1, close to public minutes of July 11, 2022. 2, a proposed acquisition of land. And 3, legal case filed against the town of Saugeen Shores by Mr. John Mann. Is there a mover and seconder? Moved by Mayette, seconded by Grace. All in favor? That's carried. We'll go into closed and the clerk will tell, I guess we're going to a different link on this one, are we, Deb?
Yes, we
Yeah,
are.
all right, so we'll log out of this one and into the closed link.